Do you or a loved one have OCD and you really want to learn about the disorder, but you don't know where to start because there's a lot of bad information out there? This video is for you. In this video, I'm going to show you the proper way to figure out and understand what OCD is by following the science, following experts, and giving you some of my personal tips that I learned going through my OCD journey. Join me at the whiteboard and we're going to go through the proper way to figure all of this stuff out.
Okay, so last week when I did my video, I said that there's really 4 steps that you need when you're starting your OCD journey. Step number 1 is you need to learn about OCD, but you have to make sure that you do it in a way where you're getting the correct information. There's a lot of bad information out there when it comes to OCD, what it is, how you get through it, and who's actually really good at treating it. Okay, so you need to look at experts in the field and books in the field and places in the field that are reputable, that are approaching it the right way, and that know what they're talking about. So, a couple things to look for when you're finding a source, and I'm going to give you some at the end of this video, so please stay tuned. But some things you're going to look for. ERP. If the book or the therapist or the organization doesn't talk about ERP, they're most likely not somebody you want to go to or not a book that you want to read, other than a few exceptions. But ERP is exposure and response prevention. The other thing, and for ERP, that's the therapeutic approach that's been around since the late 70s or the early 80s that has been shown scientifically to help improve OCD. So when you're learning, if they're not incorporating that, if their website doesn't say that, when I'm helping clients look for a therapist to go through and we found a good website, I look on their website and see, do they have ERP, exposure and response prevention? Does the book mention that? If they don't, they're probably not going to be an expert and they're probably not going to have the right information. There's a newer therapy that I can't speak too much to, or it's not necessarily new, it's just one that's people have been talking about a little more in OCD. It's called ICBT. That's another one. If a therapist is talking about that or a book is talking about that, you can be sure for the most part that that person is going to, or that book is going to go through an actual scientific based approach to OCD. Because when you're learning, you want to make sure you're learning from somebody. So the first thing you look at is, does the book or the person explain OCD in the OCD cycle? This is important too. So as we've talked about before, when you have OCD, you get some kind of obsession, then you get anxiety, and then you do compulsions. So as you're looking for people to learn from or books to read, if they don't mention compulsion or if they don't mention obsession, and if they don't understand that compulsions can be mental, this is not going to be somebody or a book that you want to learn from. I like to talk to people, and when they say, oh, I'm going to an expert or a therapist or a counselor, I say, okay, how have you all figured out your compulsions? Well, we haven't talked about compulsions yet. Well, listen, compulsions are what reinforce the obsession, right? So if your expert is not talking about compulsions, if they don't know the lingo, how the OCD cycle works, obsession, anxiety, compulsion, you feel a little bit better, then the obsession comes back. If you don't have that, you should not learn from them. Okay, you have to vet the information, and this is how you do it. Okay, so you've got to look for experts that you talk to or experts that you read from. They have to mention ERP or ICBT. They have to talk about the OCD spin or the OCD cycle. If they do not have that, that's not somebody you want to talk to. That's not a book that you want to read. Okay? Now, so then you say, okay, Jonathan, well, I can't just Google OCD near me, right? No, you really can't. You really shouldn't. So let me help you. I'm going to tell you exactly what you want to do and where you want to start. Okay? So the first thing is a website that's really great, and it's IOCDF.org. That's the International Obsessive Compulsion Foundation. They have books, they have articles, they have a lot of great information. So if you go to the IOCDF.org, rest assured that anything that's on there is going to pass their vetting process. In fact, they have not put on a lot when it comes to ICBT because there's research behind it, but there's not as much as ERP. So they're really doing a good job of vetting people that can post articles, vetting books, so you can start with them when you're trying to learn about OCD. The other thing that you can do is podcasts and what are called advocates. But I'm going to put an asterisk next to this, okay, to talk about it. So when you're looking at podcasts, there's a couple really good ones out there. And again, you need to vet them like we said before. Do they talk about ERP? Do they talk about ICBT? Do they explain how the OCD cycle works? So when you're looking for podcasts, one that I really like is called OCD Stories. Phenomenal podcast out there. Another one that you can look at is by Jenna Overbaugh. Jenna Overbaugh. We'll talk about her in a minute as well. There's another one called the OCD Whisperer. Okay, she's a very good therapist as well. And there's more out there, but when you're looking for them, especially OCD Stories, you want to look for the guests that they have, and again, research the person that is doing the podcast. Okay, so you got IOCDF, you have podcasts. We'll talk about books in a minute. IOCDF is where I would start. Podcasts. And then advocates are online. So what's an advocate? Well, anybody that speaks about OCD, they're going to be probably an advocate, right? But there are some specific advocates I would look for. If you go to the IOCDF website, you're going to see advocates. And actually, and this isn't a shameless plug, I'm an advocate for the IOCDF, where we've been vetted and they've looked at our social media posts and they've looked at how we've spoken, and we've got together in groups every time we go to the IOCDF conferences. And we're somebody that they basically trust to talk about OCD in a way where we're not going to give all this wacky information that's just from ourselves. Sure, we give our own journey, right? And we talk about things that have helped or hurt us, but we're doing it in a way that has been shown, again, to learn from. It's been shown to be kind of an appropriate approach to OCD, right? They don't just let anybody become an advocate. There's a lady named Chrissy Hodges who, she's not a therapist. She doesn't work for IOCDF, but she's been through therapy and she's done a lot for the community. She would be an advocate that people can trust because she's gone through the process, right? So IOCDF.org is where you can start for really good books. You can also go to my website or go to the link in my YouTube, which I'll talk about at the end. Look for podcasts, okay? OCD Stories, OCD Whisperer, Jenna Overbaugh, and then look at different advocates online on Instagram and TikTok that the IOCDF endorses, to look at people that actually are giving the right information. Again, remember, when you're looking at this, you have to see, do they talk about exposure and response prevention? Do they talk about compulsions? Do they talk about the cycle? I'm gonna go over that a little bit, okay? So then now you're thinking, well, I really wanna look at some books, right? Because I wanna learn, so what books are out there? What books can I get? Well, there's a few that I recommend. One of the ones I give to everybody I work with, or not give, I recommend, is called The Mindfulness for OCD. Jonathan Hirschfield, or John Hirschfield, anything that he writes is awesome. Hirschfield is one that has OCD himself and is a therapist. So it's kind of the perfect storm right there would be Jonathan Hirschfield. And this book, Mindfulness for OCD, is phenomenal. There's a really good book and an author I wanted to point out to you. This one's called Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life, the new ACT, Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. ACT's been around since about 2005, but now there's research to show that when ACT is incorporated, especially with ERP, right? That's how the therapy that I go through. ACT and ERP is a great therapeutic approach to OCD and ERP, right? So it's the lens that ERP looks through. So that's awesome. There's other books out there that are written by qualified PhDs and therapists and even non-therapists, but you have to make sure they pass the first part of the vetting process that I talked about already, right? Do they understand OCD from the scientific approach? Do they really understand what they're talking about, and are they giving scientific-based examples? Another book that I like that really isn't shown with OCD, but it's kind of a good approach because OCD can really bring us down. David Goggins is awesome. He has a book called Can't Hurt Me, another one that says Never Enough. I would highly recommend looking to purchase both of his books as well. Again, not from the OCD side, so this is my opinion, But when you go into OCD, it's going to be hard. And, I want to come in close for this. It's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be fun. Okay? The David Goggins books or things like that will help push you when you're feeling down. Okay? So, step number one, this is important, everybody. Let's learn about OCD and learn about it the right way. Okay? When you see somebody say, oh, it's all about physical people that wash their hands, that person doesn't know what they're talking about. There's mental compulsions as well. Okay? If somebody says just pray it away or think it away or snap a rubber band on your wrist, that's not the right way. They need to follow, as a wrap up, they have to understand and be treating or understanding OCD for a long time by mentioning ERP, exposure and response prevention, maybe ICBT as well. They have to mention and understand what a compulsion is. If the therapist or the book never talks about compulsions, or if it says, well, OCD is all about being organized and contamination and physical things, they don't know what they're talking about there either. And they also should talk about that circle that we get for OCD, right? The obsession, the anxiety, the compulsion, and then we feel better. So remember, step number one, you have to learn about OCD, and you have to learn about it from the appropriate people. So check out my links below, look me up on Instagram or TikTok, and check back for some more videos. And as always, everybody, stay strong.